Episode 2. My name is Seth Towerherd. I am in St. Louis, Missouri, joined by Allie Covington, the woman who fixed my shoulder like a year and a half ago, and then it turned into being on the internet talking about stuff. So, sometimes that happens in the modern world.
I
Uh,
love it when relationships evolve.
by the way, we are, 20% of the way past like the hurdle for podcasts. Um,
Really?
it's something like 92% of podcasts never get past episode 10. So the fact that we're already on episode 2 means like a lot of podcasts died before this.
Good.
We picked up over 5,000 views on the first one, so not bad for a completely unknown brand. Thank you for
Cool.
hanging out with us. And yeah, it's just kind of cool to see. Like, it's one of those things where when you do something good and it hits the market, you can tell. Sometimes you can just tell, you're like, oh, people like this. And so that's what
Which
we
is
are, which is great.
gratifying.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, cool. I'm not delusional. This actually is good, good stuff to talk about. Right.
Yeah.
Because, you can get inside your head pretty easily and go, nah, who cares? What does it matter? Blah, blah, it's
Yeah.
easy. It's easy to stop yourself before you even start.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that we're gonna touch on for episode 2 here, is the fact that, I think that everybody, whether you're kind of seeing this as an executive or manager or an entrepreneur that started a business owner, everybody second guesses their experience, and I did that so much in my 20s and 30s, and what I eventually figured out was that that actually was the thing that was giving me an advantage in a unique path that I carved out. So I'm
Yeah.
going to jump over to you first. By the way, Ali is a business coach and trainer out of Orange County, California. You originally were going to be like, you originally were thinking pre med, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to be an obstetrician.
Okay. Which is baby doctor?
I
No,
want baby doctor. I want to
baby
deliver
delivery.
babies.
Okay. And you were pretty, I feel like people who want to do that are usually pretty early on in like junior high, high school. They're like, it's sort of like being an engineer or something. Like if you're going to do it, you tend to be set on that career pretty early.
I loved babies, was really good at science. And so it just made a lot of sense. It was like, well, go into medicine. Well, then what do you want to practice? Well, I love babies. So let's do that. Every other part of medicine just sounds boring, right? Unless you love feet. I mean,
I'm so
if you
not
love
following up on that comment.
if you love feet, I guess podiatry is your you could also really, really love urology. That's not my bag. I was like,
Yeah.
I just want to deliver babies.
Okay.
And really, it was because I wanted to get because I understand how valuable that baby is to
Yeah.
the new parents, and it's like a dream come true, and I wanted to be the person that gave them that. Like, "Here you go.
Yeah.
Here's
And
your little dream."
so did you shadow anybody or anything like that? Like, were you able to do any, like, career days or anything like that in high school and go see what that was like?
My high school didn't do anything like that.
Okay.
Pasadena High, it was like, "You survived. You graduated." Right? The I was definitely the minority.
Uh,
So, it wasn't like the admin was saying, here's all these great careers that everybody could go do, right? It
yeah.
was like, just get out without getting stabbed.
It's kind of, the
That
movie
was pretty much
Easy
it.
A has got the line from the principal of that movie. "This is public school. I get paid a bonus to keep the girls off the pole and the boys off the pipe."
Oh, that's a
Kinda
good one.
yeah. So kind of that that experience, like, "Hey,
That's
just
pretty much it. Yeah.
go do
And
something, graduate."
I kind of look at education that way too, with regard to my own children,
Yeah.
right? I don't expect school to teach them everything they need to know. I figure it's going to be about 30% and the rest is up to me and
Yeah.
up to them and me to guide them to go find ways to, learn outside of the classroom. But I
Yeah.
think too many people rely too much on the classroom to teach them what they need to know. And the classroom doesn't have that curriculum. That is not what you are not going to learn how to get along in life and all the important things that you need to know through school. That's
Yeah.
just going to give you some discipline and, the ability to tolerate things that you don't like for long periods of
Well,
time,
and
you know.
I wish I would have realized earlier on, like, you have to always ask yourself what game is being played. And so
That's a
if
good
you
one.
are in if you're in a high school, a lot of times the game the, guidance counselor is playing is essentially my career is judged on how many students I put into a traditional four-year college program.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, a lot of times it's like that's the metrics they're going for, and
Okay.
that's a good thing for a lot of people, right?
Yeah. It used
However,
to be.
yeah, I mean, well, it's still depending on what's going on, it's still a necessary path for a lot of people, and you want to get through as little debt as you can. However, what happened there is we absolutely gutted the trades, and we
Mhm.
didn't tell kids that hey, it's not that hard to find plumbers that go to Hawaii twice a year because
Right.
they're making way more money than the people who have the more prestigious job titles. Bottom
Well,
line,
so many of those trades, they are making way more money than any of those kids coming out of college could make,
yeah,
unless they are a very specific engineer, doctor, lawyer, blah, 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 right?
yeah.
Even the lawyers aren't making that much money as a plumber when they first get out of college and
No,
they're, working for a firm as an
the reason I'm
associate.
not a lawyer is because one of my best friends and I were going to take the LSAT together in 2012. So I'd been out of
Mhm,
school 4 years, and I
mhm,
went and just talked to a couple lawyers in fields that I was interested in, and they were younger guys because they had time to meet with me, right? And they
mhm.
were telling me, "I'm making $50,000 a year on $200,000 of debt, and I work at Starbucks on the weekends." I was like, "That sounds horrible, and I'm not doing it." Look, that's
I
also the bubble of the Great Recession and stuff. Uh,
I had a
yeah,
similar experience. So I got into law school. I did study for the LSAT. I got in 2000, no, 1999, 98, 99, right around there. So a little earlier than you. And I wanted to be a children's rights attorney. Obviously, my passion is for children.
yeah,
Will not, this is a theme, right? And, but I thought, wait, how much do they make? 35,000 a year? How the heck am I ever going to pay off the student loans? So I thought that was a poor business decision. So I went off and got a master's in counseling psychology instead.
yeah,
Faster, cheaper, and it was really playing into my strength.
yeah. Let's go down that road, but very quickly, I was actually recruited at one point to the FBI, and as far as
I can see
jobs that
that.
people think are cool and prestigious or whatever, I had 2 graduate degrees by my late 20s because I back in the day when you could get your employer to pay for it, I did an
Mhm.
MBA, and then I turned around and did another one in political theory to study economics, and so that opened up the door to the FBI, and again, that's one of those jobs where in school, people will tell you, "That's a great job, go do that." And what I found out when I started the application process is essentially you go to, like, military boot camp for, somewhere between 4 and 6 months, and it's in Virginia. My wife and I were newly married, and we couldn't figure out budget-wise how to even make it work that, like, for me to be gone and her to be able to just live and, like, make 2 car payments and student loan payments. Or, yeah, I think it was just
Right.
1 car payment. The other car was paid off. Like, we couldn't just make a car payment, a student loan payment, buy groceries, and pay rent, if I was
Right.
making $19,000 a year. And
No.
so, again, it's one of those things where the thing that looks prestigious is not always the best thing. And I've got some good friends actually that are, that are still in the bureau, and that's cool, but it is a grind to get to where you wanna be because what's gonna happen is you're gonna get out of their boot camp basic training thing, and you're gonna be stuck in North Dakota processing credit card fraud for 4 or 5 years while you wait for some seniority to move up. But
Yeah.
people will tell you that's a really prestigious career, and in some ways it is, and sort of like the lawyers making $45,000 a year, I also met several people who hated it and wish they hadn't done it.
You know what? The only time in my life that I ever wished that I had gone to law school was 2019 when I was facing 2 custody battles concurrently. Then I was like, "Ah, it would have been really nice to, know a little bit about the law," but that's the only time in my life I felt like that because I hate paperwork.
Yeah, and it's mostly reading and
Mostly
writing.
pa
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
mostly
uh
that.
Allie's a
Yeah.
business coach, including my business coach, and one of the things she made me do is, like, get a real lawyer for my, some of my larger contracts, and what I found out is that so much of legal work is literally just going back and forth on individual words,
Mhm.
of contracts, and that's I would much rather be the person
Because of the
generating the
interpretation in the
business.
courtroom.
Yeah, I would much rather sell stuff and, kind of stimulate the economy than sit there and go, "Well, if we put the word 'be' here, then you're more protected from, not getting paid." I'm glad somebody can do that. It's an important job.
It
It's just not
is.
mine.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
God love the
Uh,
good attorneys.
so between undergrad and getting to the point where you wanted to, not go to law school, not go to med school, man, you really rejected, like, all the cool careers that you're supposed to do.
I know.
You actually could have done either one of them. You're like, "No, I'm not gonna do it." And so you went from that to finance and personal training,
Well, I
and
was personal training the whole way through.
the whole
So
way through.
personal
Yeah,
training is when I started freshman year of college, of undergrad.
which
That
is
was
a
just my college job. I thought
way
I was
better
just gonna do
job
that.
probably than like most college jobs as far as what you're making, right?
Right. I was like, "I
Yeah.
can do this while I go to school." Most
Okay.
other kids are gonna, like, work at the grocery store or bus tables or whatever. I was like, I just wanna make a little bit more per hour,
How did you
put
and so
in."
that was the '90s, right?
Oh, yes,
Okay.
95.
So, no internet. How did
I
you
am
actually, like,
old.
find people?
Well, you go to work back then, you go to work at a gym,
Yeah.
and the gym has the people, and you're supposed to walk around the floor and go help people, and if somebody needs more help, then you offer them a workout, and if they need more help, then you can offer them training packages and stuff like that. So,
So it's just cold selling. Okay.
yep,
Yeah.
in
I
person.
I don't know how much gyms do that anymore because I think that's kind of been rejected. I remember being a member of LA Fitness and having gotten out of the shower, and
Well, it was
apparently they
selling
were
through service,
selling through
right?
service. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got out of
Yeah.
the shower.
I got out of the shower, I'm in a towel, and, a trainer comes up to me, I'm in a towel, and he's just like, "Hey," and he starts the cold pitch, and I'm
Oh,
like,
no.
"I don't
Oh,
wanna talk to you right
no.
now." And he
Oh,
just keeps
no.
going, and I said, "I don't wanna ever have a conversation where I'm not wearing pants, leave me alone." It's like a reasonable it's just a reasonable
That's a
policy in
reasonable
any
request.
business.
Yeah,
Any service offered, like,
that dude did not read the room real well. He,
you should be able
clearly
to
did
go
not
from the
have a very high
shower.
EQ.
Yeah,
Well, you know what? I never did any of that, but I sold through service, and
yeah,
because I delivered great service, I became the number 1 trainer in the club.
yeah, and did you also launch while you were in college? I think it was, like, the first group weights class in Southern California?
Yes, it was. It was a my group personal training class. I called it SET, stood for Strength Endurance Training, and isn't that a cute little fun acronym because we were doing sets of
Yeah.
weight in class? Yeah, right. And, yeah, so nobody had ever done that before. I just used bands and dumbbells. I had a full flow that I mapped out, and when I started teaching the class, everybody loved it. It was jam-packed every week.
Yeah.
No room left for anybody.
And
It was
how
the
much
only one of its
more money
kind.
did you make versus working with people in the one-on-one then at that point?
Oh, I didn't make any more money. I just taught the class. So, I was teaching 20 people weight training instead of 20 individual clients, but I only got paid, like, maybe 15, $17 an hour to teach a class.
Ugh. Yeah, I
I mean,
mean,
in the '90s, that was good. That $17 to teach a class in the '90s was good money.
yeah, but
That
the
was like,
split
"Ooh,
all
minimum wage was fine." Right? It
okay,
was
so
fine.
if you 4x minimum wage, that's not too bad. It's just
Not too
not,
shabby.
that's also pretty interesting because it opens up the lane of, like, selling that when I feel like in the '90s, people were either complete muscleheads or they thought you could just do cardio. Like, there wasn't a lot of in between as to where now you can't open up Instagram without somebody saying, "No matter who you are, you should do some kind of resistance training."
It's a good thing because back then, yeah, it was all about cardio, running, Stairmaster, whatever. Trying to get people to lift weights was like, gosh, this is excruciating trying to explain all the benefits and why you have to do both. I mean, if you're not doing cardio, your training's gonna suffer. Your weightlifting's gonna suffer. If you're
Yeah.
not training, your whole body's gonna suffer. So, like, what are we talking about here? But yeah, so it's definitely moved in the right direction, which
Yeah,
is good.
but
It's
you
just that
had to sell into a market that wasn't as ready for that, right?
oh yeah, no, that I thought they were ready, and I was right. The gyms didn't realize it, but I had carte blanche to launch the class, and my boss was like, "This is great stuff. You should trademark it." I was like, "I can barely put gas in my car. You want me to trademark something?" So of course I didn't. And then I left working for Bally's and I went off to other clubs and completely forgot about it. And then I show up at 24 Hour Fitness in 2012 and I'm like, "Holy crap, that's my class." And same name and everything. Now they bastardized the content because
Yeah.
they weren't the creators. But I mean, talk about staying power, talk about an idea that really worked and ran with it. And then they replaced it with Les Mills, body pump, and all that crap. And I'm just looking at that going, why did you guys buy into that idea? Oh, let me take a barbell that's light enough for me to push up like here, put it on my shoulders, and then do squats. Excuse me? Anyway, I digress.
Okay. So,
Sorry.
uh in that, I'm gonna get us back on track here because in that
Okay.
time, you had a mentor that told you if you wanna help people, don't do med school, don't do law school, go into finance.
Yeah.
Um, okay,
You could
so
stop trading your time for money and go leverage it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and so you're in direct sales at that point, right?
Yes. I mean, you're talking to
So
people one on one, right?
yeah,
There's
no paycheck
no
is what I
lead,
meant.
no
It's just
paycheck,
commission, no
no
leads.
paycheck, no leads. You're generating everything out of thin air.
Yeah.
Yeah, did that for 20
Which
years.
I don't know why we've taught so many people to just be terrified of that because that's also where all the upside's at. Like, there's
Well,
only so far. I mean, and not that there's not big corporate salaries for executives and stuff, and you can get somewhere that way, but there's a lot of upside in just selling.
there is, but I think the reason why people are terrified of it is because they think that they're going to be that goofy guy in the locker room that's going to piss people off and they don't know
Yeah,
what they're doing. So they don't want to be that person. So they don't even try. Like, you don't have to be an idiot. Just be you, like, be good. Treat other people the way you want to be treated. Help them, serve them. If you do it to a good enough capacity, then people are going to want to work with you. And if they don't have a big enough problem that your one or two pieces of advice in transition completely solve their problem, then they weren't going to be a client anyway because they don't have enough to solve. But when that is just enough to have them go, shoot, I know I need a lot more help than I thought I did, then you're there and they appreciate you. What people are afraid of sales is they think they're not the ones who fulfill. When you're the one who also fulfills, you
yeah,
can sell so differently. But when you're not the fulfiller, you're just selling somebody else on fulfilling and you're making a promise. Then you hope that it's going to be the right one, that they're going to be
yeah,
able to fulfill properly. But I think it's
yeah.
different when you're fulfilling and selling, when you're the service provider yourself.
I think I got a lot more comfortable as well when I realized that, I get a lot of people who just like, quote unquote, like, just want to pick my brain or want to ask me questions about, in particular, like podcasting, writing content and stuff.
Hmm.
And usually, what I do to make sure that I'm kind of talking to the right people is I try to dissuade them right off the bat. Like most people, like, oh my gosh, gonna tell them how great I am and all this stuff. I usually just say, hey, this is a lot of work. Another way to go about this is just run a ton of Google and Facebook and Instagram ads. Like if you're trying to generate leads, like that's still pretty dang consistent. Go spend the money. Why don't you just start there? And then if they come back and say, well, I've really got something to say, this really solves a problem. I do think that dang near every business could use a podcast if done really well. Most of them fall trapped to what I just said, which is they can't get past episode 10. They don't have a plan. They don't know what the heck they're doing. They just open up a mic and talk, and they don't really know who they're talking to. And they think that their expertise is going to, you know, go a long ways. But if you're not packaging it correctly, then it's not going to work out. And so I
I
usually just tell
agree.
them, first of all, just don't use my services. Like just go spend the money. And if they don't want to just go spend the money, then, maybe we need to
You have something to
talk
talk
about,
about.
yeah, we have something to talk about.
Yeah.
But when you go about it that way, as opposed to what people think sales is, which is this desperate, breathless, like, oh my gosh, you're going to buy this right now, sign on this thing, high pressure.
No.
It's like,
It's not an
do anything.
infomercial. You're solving a problem that somebody
Yeah.
has. If you can solve it simply and they don't need you, then cool. They would not have made a good client anyway. But if you can't
Yeah.
solve it simply and they need you, then it's pretty obvious that you're capable of helping them.
Yeah. Another thing that it's tough for people to get their head around is that when you're first starting out in business, if you're going out on your own, the thing that can sink you is signing the wrong client because they will
Mhm.
be on you all the time. Your per hour, rate will go down, sometimes in the negative, and they will just absolutely swamp you. I would say
Yep.
so. I've been out on my own 3 times. First time I quit when I shouldn't have because the healthcare mandate went into effect, and I, you know, didn't want to pay $700 a month for health insurance for one person, so I just got a job again, which was stupid. Second time, I had to shut down working for myself because we needed to move to be closer to family. But I look at that second time, and I was doing a lot of podcast work in Chicago, and I spent almost all my time on one client that was only contracted for 10 hours a week, and probably took close to 30, and called me. I mean, 7 a.m., 11 p.m., and I would pick up the dang phone. And when I look back, I was like, well, that's I can't live without that client. When I look back, if I would have dropped that client, I would have almost certainly picked up the right kind of client to continue on.
Yeah.
I probably had 2 bad anchor clients, that were just, I did the deal wrong, right? Like, I gave them
Mhm.
work on a retainer versus charging them hourly, so of course they're gonna run me to death and continue to ask me to do more stuff.
Yep. Yeah. Business is hard when you're first trying to figure out what your capacity is and what you're gonna do and how you wanna live your life, and there's a lot of factors to consider, and that you just learned the hard way, but from one
Yeah.
client, but at least you didn't keep repeating your mistake.
Yeah.
That's the
That
good news.
that's that's absolutely true. And
I see people do that a lot. Like,
it's
"We're
one of
still
those
doing
things
that, huh?
where
Okay."
even, kind of being getting towards, not too far out from being a year out again, and this time it really coming together differently. And I could even see clients that are better this time that I may have to another 3 or 4 months in. It's like, well, if I'm not advancing you more quickly, if we can't figure out how to work together, if you can't listen to me, then, eh, I probably need to move on.
There you are. It's the following instructions.
Yeah.
It's the, "I don't I wanna do part of your program, Allie, but not the whole part." Okay, well, you're gonna find out pretty quickly how well that works for you.
Yeah.
And when you get stalled
And
out on your results, you're like, What do I do? Why don't you finish doing all the parts, the component
yeah.
parts?"
And
You
there
can't
comes
do
a
the stuff
point
you
where
enjoy and not the stuff
yeah,
you don't enjoy and still get the results.
yes.
Doesn't work
What
like that.
whatever arena you're in, there comes a point where you gotta look at a client and go, "Oh, if I can," "we can drag this out for another 3 or 4 or 5 months, and I'll probably have more money in my pocket, but you'll also be even more upset and talk bad about me for reasons that are your fault.
Right.
So the best thing I can probably do for my long-term reputation is to cut this off, even if it means driving DoorDash on the weekends for a minute." Um,
Yeah.
I
I'm
mean
after the testimonial myself. So
what's that?
I way over deliver. I'm after the
Yeah,
testimonial.
yeah.
That's why I way over deliver. But
Yeah,
yes.
and so
Yeah.
one of those things is not everybody's a good client. You can't help everybody,
Mhm.
and if somebody's just going to just absolutely just, tear all the light out of the room to where you don't enjoy it anymore,
Right.
you're back to being worse than you were before you left your job. It's way worse.
Yep.
If you think one boss that's bad is bad, try like 6 bosses that are terrible because you wound up with the wrong kind of clients.
Yep. That's
Uh,
true.
it's and that's where I've seen
6
people,
terrible
like,
bosses,
run
that's
back,
funny.
it's not the wrong choice for everybody by any means, but that's where I've seen people run back to corporate America that probably didn't need to,
Mhm.
because they're like, "Oh my gosh, I could never go on vacation. They were always calling me. I couldn't, I just could never get ahead. I realized I was working 80 hours a week, and making the same money as 40 hours a week." Well, it's like, yeah, you set out to replace your existing wage, and you just signed enough freelance clients to do that. So it's like
Mhm.
you did your job somewhere else for more people, which is pretty different than trying to create an organization that scales.
Yep.
And so you went out with the wrong goal. You're like, well, if I can only
Yep.
get back to my old salary, I'll be fine. That's not the question to ask yourself. The question to ask yourself is, how
Mhm.
can I grow year after year?
Yeah. That's one question. 'Cause what I find is that people they don't ask the right questions. They don't ask good quality questions. They don't get good quality answers to their what they're really searching for. So they'll ask a question and it's like, "That really what you're asking?" I don't think that's really what you're asking. What you're really asking is something much deeper, but most people can't even get in touch with that.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, they might be asking for, like, "Well, help me with X, Y, and Z." Right? And it's
Yeah,
like, but what's 3 layers underneath X, Y, and Z is this little issue right here. This is what
yeah,
we have to work on because when we work on this, all those other layers are gonna work they're just gonna correct themselves almost
yeah,
naturally, almost effortlessly. But everyone looks at the top layer and says, "This is what I need to work on." It's like, "No, that's not what you need to work on. You need to work on this right here," like mindset, right? So somebody says, "Well, I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling tired and anxious. What do I do? How do I get some better sleep, Allie?" Is that really what the problem is? Or are you tired and anxious because you're burnt out, because you're not leading your organization properly, because you're doing half the job with your workers, half the job of being the CEO, and you can't figure out which end is up or down? And of course, you're tired and burnt out and
yeah,
anxious because you're afraid that this is what the rest of your life is going to look like, and you can't get out of it yet because you haven't managed yourself well. You're asking the wrong question. The wrong question isn't about sleep. How do I get more rest? The question is, how do I lead my organization better? How do I personally perform at a better level so that they can do their job and I can do my job instead of two people's jobs?
Yeah.
That's the better question.
And that
That's
is
an
such a bummer
example.
when I've seen people who have worked so hard to get to like more, kind of upper, mid to upper level management or executive role, and they've got the title and stuff. And then they just
Mhm.
moan about it, like, oh, this is so bad. This is so awful. I hate it so much. I'm trapped. I just
The
wish I could be a
pressure.
landscaper. It never turns off. And then I can sit there and go, like, okay, but I've met some um, people who are, in similar situations to you and way above you,
Yeah.
and you find people that are able to do the job in a reasonable amount of time and consistently produce results. And then
Mhm.
you find people that just live off of like alcohol and saltines because they're so stressed out all the time.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, they don't know what's happening. Their health is deteriorating and they're just like, "I'm a mess. I don't even know what to do." It's like, "Well, we need to untangle all of this." That's a
Yeah.
whole lot of nuts
Yeah.
right
And
there.
there's I think a lot
It
of people
starts with
don't.
wrong assumptions.
Yes, a lot of people don't prepare themselves or prepare to live, work, manage differently when they move up. Like, they're like, "Okay, well, this is like my old job with more money." And it's like, "No, it's not." And you can do this job, you just can't do this job like your last role that you
Right.
promoted from, or you're gonna be in trouble here.
Right. Right.
Uh,
Having your own job is very different from having a job at a company
yeah,
and just waiting for somebody to tell you what to do.
yeah. Well, you coach a lot of
Mhm.
executives. Let's stay on the corporate side for a second.
Okay.
When somebody gets kinda to that, like, where they have the word officer in their title, director or
Mhm.
officer, like, depending on the organization, how far they've moved up. And then they're
Mhm.
just stressed till they're working around the clock, etcetera. How do you normally get out of that? Like, or how does somebody get fixed on that? Because it is a solvable problem. It's not just, well,
It
you can wait
is.
80 hours a week until you die at 57.
Right, because there's lots of executives that are winning at it. So somebody's doing something right. So why would you think that you can't?
Yeah,
So, but it's a combination of managing your time, saying no, removing things instead of adding things to your plate. It's more about what are the three things that only you can do that nobody else can do, and can you get somebody else to leverage all the other things that need to get done for your job to succeed, but without you having to do it.
yeah,
So that's one thing. The other thing is imposter syndrome is a big one, right? People they move up the ladder and they get there and they're like, "Whoa, I made it! Holy crap, I made it! Huh? Am I good enough to be here?" Right? And they start to panic. So getting through imposter syndrome and the negative squirrels in your head and all of that is a big one for a lot of people.
and that's something you and I have worked on for me quite a bit with you as my business
Mhm.
coach, because, like, I had a little bit of a, unexpected hiccup last week, and
You did.
I was but I wasn't as freaked out as I was 6 months ago. So
I
figure
agree.
figure
And
this
you
out.
did really, really well.
Yeah.
You did really well. You grabbed me in a minute and said like, "Hey, do you got a second?" And we just hashed it out in 5 minutes and you were off on your way. You're like, "Oh, cool. I've got direction. I know what to do. I know what to expect and I can handle this."
And
5
long story
minutes.
short,
That's all
nothing
it
bad
was.
happened. Nothing bad happened. It resolved itself. But
Mhm.
younger or earlier on, I would have just sat around and stewed and had zero productivity
Mhm.
for the week, basically. And instead, I had one of the best weeks of the past 9 months as far as what I was able to produce, which was
Good.
really cool. Really
Well,
cool.
the
So how do you
mindset
get past
between
the imposter syndrome there?
the mindset between an employee and a business owner are two very different mindsets, right? The responsibility, the leadership that rests on you as the business owner or, executive that doesn't have any replacement feels much heavier than somebody who is an employee who's like, I could go get another job. If I got fired, I don't want to lose this job, but I could. I could go
Yeah.
get another one if I had to. Right. So don't piss me off too much. It's kind of the attitude that employees can have because they have options. But somebody who's building their own business, they don't have an option. They have to stick with it. It's like being married. You are now committed, so you
Yeah.
need to make it work, right? And there is no fallback option. There is no going to get a job. I mean, of course you could get a job, but like you're not employable anymore at that point. That's
Yeah.
why you left to go get your own job, to
Well,
go create your own job to begin with.
and when I look at when I kind of first got like a director title, I think I was 29. So decently young. I was at a nonprofit at the time with I think about a $20 million annual budget, 100 and some employees. And the thing I probably would have done differently over the last decade,
Mhm.
is that when I was kind of in that kind of upper management situation, I was trying to make it work in a couple different places with subpar team members. And I think
Mm.
that one of the top things that people that are business owners and executives just don't do that they should is just fire people faster.
Mhm.
In this case, the CEO was asking me to give somebody a second, third, fourth chance because it was a nonprofit. And then I had two employees who were actively sabotaging me by fighting with each other. I don't think they were trying to get me fired, but they were going behind, essentially battling for power.
Yeah.
And I was just like, we need to get rid of them both. And then one
Mhm.
of them had a health issue and had to be out of work for a minute. And I was like, well, we can't let her go now. And I'm like, okay, cool. We can let her come back and destroy more stuff. That's
Yeah.
great.
The passionate CEO, compassionate CEO, right, just makes poor decisions because they're more concerned about how that employee is going to feel than the health of all of the employees under their purview.
Yeah.
And that is a big mistake.
Yeah.
Nonprofits are notorious for it because they go into the nonprofit sector because they feel that it's like it's a more altruistic calling. It makes them a better person somehow because they're the CEO of a nonprofit as opposed to a big for-profit company that might be public. It's just as much work. It's just they went into it with the wrong mindset and the wrong assumptions. The assumption being everybody who comes to work for me is going to do their absolute best. They're going to put their best foot forward
Because that's
because it's a
how the leader got
nonprofit.
there, is by putting their best foot forward, right?
Right.
And
But
by
every
caring
employee's
and
going to do that.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
no. And so a
And
lot
then
of nonprofits tolerate stuff that they should not be tolerating that
on
another
the
corporation wouldn't.
yes, and on the for-profit side, I can think about a gig that it was in the last few years of my life, and I came in and I realized that I probably should have fired 1 or 2 people within the first 2 weeks. And then it was that thing where it's like, I'm brand new and I was brought in to manage this team and
And I
people
don't want to be the
liked
jerk,
well, it's like,
right?
oh, people like these people on a personal level, but they kinda complain about their work, so, what is this gonna do to me if I essentially clean house for part of the team? Are the loyal team members gonna wanna stick around after I fire people? And then after I did start firing, what I found out was the loyal team members were closer to leaving because they could not stand working with subpar people, and normally
See,
it's the other way around, is that, executives, business owners, CEOs start losing a couple of rock stars, like, "Oh my gosh, so you left because you didn't like working with this person?" It's like, "Yeah, that person was crazy, and this other company that offered me a job has different problems, but this person isn't there, so see ya." "Well, can we convince
right.
you to stay?" And it's like, at that point, it's too late. It's like, "No,
Mhm.
you should have figured out my frustration when there was still a chance to do that."
When I told
And
you I was frustrated about so and so.
yeah, and so
Right.
looking back, probably my biggest career regret in the nonprofit and in the corporate space is not just firing people within a month of taking a new job.
Because they
Unfortunately,
take it personally. They think
yeah,
if I got fired, I would have my feelings hurt. So therefore, I don't want to fire somebody because I don't want to hurt their feelings. This is
yeah,
not show friends. This is show business. If they can't step up into their job and do it well without creating a toxic environment with all of their complaining, then they need to go figure out how to do it better someplace else. But there's
yeah,
no room in it in your organization because you have a job to do in your company. Your
yeah,
company is there to provide a service or a valuable something to somebody who needs it. And you can't get that done with people like that in your organization. And they need to just put their big girl panties on
yeah.
and get
Um,
the job done.
I was told when I was thinking about, possibly cutting somebody in the corporate world. I remember new in the job and HR saying, "Well, this person's kind of like the mascot for the company." And it's like, cool. Well, we should give that person a job to go to live events and wear a mascot costume then, because the sales team is pissed about what marketing is delivering. And I do not see any possible way that this person can improve upon their skill set. And then I found out that when I asked this employee to try to improve,
Hmm.
later the employee's peers told me, the other members of the team told me, well, the employee decided to do even less work because you didn't appreciate what was being turned in. So why should they try at all?
Oh, well, there's the door. That's why you
Yeah.
should try it all.
Yep.
Right? pretty sure my 12-year-old gave me the same line sometime. Well, if you're going to do none other than that, then I'm just not going to do anything. I was like, that's not the right answer. That is not how you get your phone back. That is not how you get what you want. You want that phone? You shut your pie hole. Go do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Zip it. We're done. Go. You got work to do.
Yeah.
And you got to run a family the same way you run an organization. That's one of the biggest benefits to being a leader in a corporate structure or in your own business or being an entrepreneur or a business owner that's even just has a bigger organization, but it's yours and you started it from the ground up, right? There's a lot of value in stepping into that leadership role, and your kids can benefit wildly from that if you're doing it right. Otherwise, they will end up being just as pissed off as your disgruntled employees.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which you will treat them the same. Yeah.
So back to the episode's title here on how to, using all your experience to go forward. So you went from not a doctor, not a lawyer, to finance, personal training, to eventually starting a business during COVID, because essentially the technology had advanced and the culture had advanced far enough that you wanted to partially do remote app-based personal training. And I think that was 2012 when people told you were insane, right?
I got the idea in 2009. There was only a handful of people. Well, everybody that was in my friends that were in marketing and business were like, that's a brilliant idea. And my friends that were in it, my colleagues in fitness, they were like, that can't be done. I was like,
well,
hold my beer.
Could part of that reason be, well, if that can be done, then my livelihood's in jeopardy. So I'm going to
exactly. That's exactly where they were coming from.
Yeah.
Oh no, if that's true, then I'm on my way out. I've got 10 years left. It's like, yeah, you kind of do.
Yeah. So did you need every turn, everything that didn't happen? Like, has that funneled into where you're at now? So like you got a master's in counseling, you decided not to practice, right? You decided to go into finance instead and essentially use the tools to work in the business world, right?
Yeah.
So you couldn't have done it without the master's degree.
I could have, but the master's,
But it
what
would
the
have been
master's
different.
did is it honed my natural gift. It kind of like, just think of it like it smoothed out my rough edges, right? Gave me a little bit of a framework, gave me vocabulary to use that people would understand, and an ability to kind of start to see who is really in desperate need of medication and a padded room, and who can, who I can work with, right? So it rounded out my rough edges. But my natural gift, the thing that I came into this, body with, is that psychological understanding and being able to see where somebody's at and meet them where they are and move them forward. And I can do it very, very quickly. I don't even have to necessarily talk to somebody. I can look at them, see their posture, see the look on their face, see their body, and go, I know where they're at.
Yeah.
I know where to fix them.
I had the good and bad of having quite a bit of success at a very young age. And, you're like, oh, well, that's got to be great, right? Not always. I mean, there certainly is the downside to it. So I blew up my knee in junior college basketball.
Okay.
Which, by the way, there was a proposed NCAA rule change about schools directly paying athletes now out of like non-educational funds. So, I plan to go back to Blackhawk Junior College and demand the $23 I'm owed for averaging 3 points a game. I mean, that's adequate compensation. Enough to see a movie, probably.
Right. Maybe.
But, I'd worked my whole life to get there. I blew out my knee and tore my rotator cuff, and I was just like, okay, how much surgery can I keep having? My freshman year, I was in rehab for 6 months. I was working with physical therapists for 4 months with my knee, came back, got hurt again. I was back in PT, and it's like, okay, this, and they're talking about opening up my shoulder, and if the surgery didn't go well, like permanent, kind of damage. And it's like, well, this is, this has run its course. Like this,
you've got to have a really special gift to keep going down that road, right? You need to be like Jordan to be able to want to do that, to put yourself through all of that. Because if you're not going to reach that level, like, why would you destroy your body for that?
Yeah. And so I wound up, I knew I wanted to get in media. I wound up on a country radio station in Iowa from midnight to 6 a.m. on the weekends. And sometimes by the time I got off that job, I would have been up for like, 27, 28 hours straight with
That's
a
a
nap.
hard hustle right there.
Yeah,
That's a hard hustle. Good
yeah.
job.
My parents had split up. I needed to help my mom pay some bills, so I was doing manual labor during the day, and then I was actually selling high-end women's shoes in the evenings for Saks Fifth Avenue,
Huh.
which was something I was really not into, but I figured out how to sell stuff, and I was making $3,000 some weeks, which is pretty crazy.
I
And
bet you were like, "There's a lot of women that spend way too much money on shoes."
well, and they
Right?
wanted me to stay and make that my career, and I'm like, "I'm sorry, I just can't spend the rest of my life with this, group of shallow chain smokers," which is kind of who works at that. Uh, I need to go
Yeah.
do something else.
They're like,
So
"Too
I
easy.
the
Next."
only way I could get into what my preferred career would be to take a job just because nobody else wanted to do it, which is to work overnights on the weekends. So I'd work
Uh-huh.
at the mall 9:30, 10, and then I would drive to the radio station, let myself in, and sleep on the couch in the lobby for like 90 minutes, and then get up and work the rest of the night till 6 in the morning, and
Wow.
then drive home. And,
I like it.
so
I like
that
it.
very quickly, within months, landed me a gig in Chicago, and I wound up, moving from, like, morning show sidekick to evenings to afternoons to, then getting into a situation where they were looking at actually selling me, kinda later in my career, actually, like, selling me as a syndicated show to other stations. While I'm doing
Wow.
that, I'm going to college because I think that I probably should, check the box on the degree, and I needed it, right? I think I graduated with like a 2.8, because I was working so much.
Who cares? You have
Yeah,
a
I mean,
degree. Nobody cares what
I
the
had
GPA was.
3 I graduated with 2 D minuses my last semester. I had math for
Right
gen
on.
ed my last semester, and I was actually on TV at the time as well, and, I, uh, I just never went because it was at 7:30 in the morning and I was out all those hours of the night working. So I went
Yeah.
into the final of my senior year, my last semester. I had to get 83 out of 150 to graduate on the test, and I got an 85.
Oh,
So I
nice
literally
job.
graduated by one question.
I
Uh,
like how you didn't overwork yourself
yeah,
to get a
uh,
high.
but
Like,
in
"That's enough."
yeah, it was pretty crazy. In undergrad as well,
Good.
I wound up on a judge on essentially like the black gospel music, version of American Idol, and that
Oh,
won like 5 Emmys. So I was
interesting.
doing that, and I was also writing for magazines by the time I was 19 or 20 years old. And
Oh,
at the time, it looked like there were like, I was probably gonna move to LA and pursue the TV thing, and things were really jumping off. I had before, like, there was a term Me Too, one of the things that kinda derailed my TV stuff moving forward was that I, had a TV producer that was, from LA, and he wanted me to meet him in his hotel room for drinks at 10 PM.
oh,
And I was like, "Yeah, that's not doing that." So
sketchy.
I just didn't go. I felt like that was a very weird situation.
It was a
And
casting couch call.
it was, because,
It was a
uh,
casting call for
it
sure.
was.
It was a
Because 3 months later, he was arrested for, I don't wanna get a content strike on YouTube, so child material on his laptop, and he did, like, legit prison time. So,
So glad
it's
you avoided that one.
yeah, well, and people are like, "Oh,
Yeah.
well, how could you be sexually harassed? You're 6'6". Terry Crews, the actor, talked about being sexually harassed by an agent, like, at a party in front of other people, and, obviously, he could have picked this person up and just tossed him through a wall, but the thing is, then you're a felon. So
Right. Well, and it's pretty shocking to have somebody go and do something like that. You're like, "This is a
yeah,
crime that you're committing against me." I don't even know what to think right now. So shock sets in before you, like, react to the whole thing. So I could
yeah.
see how that would happen.
So that was the
And
person that
then
was yeah, go ahead.
oh, and then you feel like, "What did I do wrong?" And then everybody looks at the blames the victim.
Yeah,
So then it becomes like, I don't wanna speak out because then they're just gonna frame it like I was the one who was asking for it, and they twist it around, and you're the one who's traumatized.
yeah,
Yeah, it gets
and
ugly fast. Good job.
so when we talk about using all of our experience, it's like, well, I thought that was gonna be the thing, right? I got
Mhm.
close. Then I got actually decently close to being hired by, the Canadian MTV, which was called Much Music at the time, I believe.
There
I
was a
got down
Canadian MTV?
yeah, there was. I don't know if it's
Oh,
still around.
that's
So,
so
like,
cute.
early 2000s, it was like I was looking at possibly moving to Toronto to work for them, on
Wow.
camera, and so
Good
neither
thing
one
you
of those
didn't.
things yeah, for a lot of reasons. For a lot of reasons. Um, eh, and at the time, it's like you have this whole life planned out around, being big in TV. Didn't happen.
Mhm.
Then as a journalist, keep in mind I'm still working in radio full time, but as a journalist, I was able to interview everyone from Barack Obama to Gerard Butler, and that started to really climb for me, like with a national profile. And I started to see other journalists like getting book deals,
Mhm.
and that's like the next thing. It's like you're a journalist, and then you're an author, and then you go speak and stuff. And that didn't hit.
Mhm.
To be quite forthright, there, it didn't hit because I just am not a massively left-wing political liberal, which is what it takes to make it in that world. And
Right.
so I was actually I was supposed to be a rated top critic for Rotten Tomatoes at one point, and they were just supposed to send me my login so I could submit my reviews for a national publication. And 6 months later, they just didn't give it to me, stopped letting me in. And
Oh,
what I have since found out, and the world since found out, is that there is this whole kind of like back alley deal system that was running Rotten Tomatoes, where they were only
oh.
letting certain critics in because essentially they were in bed with the studios. And you'll notice that like until very recently, every Marvel movie got great reviews no matter what. And
Mhm.
essentially that was kind of like this
How that
wink and
happened.
nod mafia thing where it's like, well, Marvel movies get good reviews, right? And if they think you're not going to be like that, then you're probably not going to get to that level. And
Very
so I went
political.
from being offered to be like flown out to LA to interview Christian Bale at a premiere to that world just kind of drying up, and quite frankly, being discriminated against for political reasons in the media world, and that just dried up. And so it's like, well, there's two careers that went away. The radio thing being syndicated, there was unfortunately a big shakeup when one of my managers that had the idea to sell the show very tragically passed away. I think about the age I am now, like 41, 42, four kids,
Mhm.
just awful situation. And then that in a roundabout way sort of led to, radio. I just kind of realized it's not going anywhere. Um, I quit all of it and I just started freelancing and teaching college on the side just because I
Oh,
didn't know what to do. Because
that
I'd been a
makes sense.
success very young. Like I'd had so much more success at 23 and 24 than I did at 28 and 29. It's like, well, now what do I do? And I went through a pretty
Um,
sad period where, quite frankly, like
I bet.
I just taught college, did some work, and then I would get like just take out and play video games, watch a movie. And I did that for
Yeah,
8 or 9 months just with no plan.
because 'cause you're
And
depressed.
I was. And
You're
then one morning,
grieving you're grieving your future that you thought you had and that you spent all that time working towards. So, yeah.
yes. And quite frankly, I was working like 80 hours a week during that time. So I didn't date that much in my 20s because it was really, really hard to make a relationship work when you got TV on the weekends, radio during the week.
Right.
You're writing around the clock. Like it's
Your
really
career
hard to
was
make
your
anything go.
relationship.
It
And so it
is.
felt like that died too. Yeah,
Yes. And
a lot of
then
grief.
I was watching my friends get married, have kids. I almost got my own romantic comedy. I really was a groomsman or usher 18 times, I believe. So I'm like this professional wedding assistant that doesn't get paid. I have to pay to be in all this crap. And it's like,
Right.
okay, so my friend's moving on. All this stuff tanked. I have no idea what else I'm good at. I have no idea what to do. So I'm just going to sit here. And everything changed when just with a prayer, just that I could turn my life around. And then I got up and ran 3 miles the next morning. And within 3 or 4 months of that, I, um, broke up with a girl who was pretty nuts, and
That's
then
good.
God wanted me to really not get back together with her, so I was on my way to possibly reconcile with her, and I got in a head-on car crash, which is the almighty's way of saying it's, yeah, you'd probably be better off to just die than to go back down that road. Um, and,
That's
then
one way of looking at it, yeah.
my wife and I met. I got a job that was, in retrospect, terrible, and that I complained about quite a bit on this podcast, but it at least moved me somewhere, right?
Mhm.
And so it wasn't a failure in that way. And now that I'm 41, I look back and I realize that, as a, kind of content creator and producer, I've helped clients launch multiple podcasts that have gotten 1 million downloads within year one. Well, there's a lot
Mhm.
of people out there in that game. Most of them didn't have the pressure of an Emmy winning show, TV show, or a daily radio show where you got a quarterly report card that told you whether or not you got to keep your job. And so
Right.
the lessons I learned there actually got me to the next level. It just took me another 10 years to be able to understand or acknowledge that that's the good thing had happened.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it takes a while to look back and say, oh, so I'm really glad that that thing didn't work out for me because it worked out so much better over here. But it's hard in the moment unless you can really start to dig in and notice it in that moment. But you got to be really present and not panicking
Okay, so
in order
tell
to make
tell me
that
about that because
happen.
I want to unpack something where I wish I would have done something differently. But you say you got to be really
Okay.
present, not panicky. What does that mean? I mean, you come
Okay.
with
Well,
pretty high
so
powered people.
right. So let me do I'll use my story, my example. 2019, right? Two concurrent custody battles. I've got a newborn who's got six medical conditions, and I can't work outside the home because I have no family that can come in and take care of him.
Yeah.
And so what am I supposed to do? Right? I did everything I could, but that year, what I did to heal myself was I stayed very present. I stayed very focused on getting out of the pit that I was in. Like, this sucks. It's only temporary. I've got certain things that I've got to do to keep up my head on straight so that I can be ready with answers when things come at me because it was like a constant set of waves that were flowing my way. They were trying to crush me. And every time I came up for air, then another wave would come, but I was coming up for air. And so instead of focusing on the waves, I was focusing on the air. I was focusing on what's going to keep my head above water and keep me moving forward. So what I mean by being present is there were moments where I could have run around spinning my wheels. Actually, the whole year I could have run around spinning my wheels like, "Oh my god, I need to look for an answer. I need to look for an answer." But instead, I got very quiet. I meditated a lot. I focused on all the things that were going right. I wrote out my gratitude journal and I kept track of everything every day. But it was in those quiet moments when I didn't know what to do that I just got very quiet and listened for answers. And God, universe, life, whatever you want to call it, it was like, "Go do this." And I would follow the breadcrumbs and I would go do what I was told, right? What I heard I was supposed to go do, and it switched everything. So here's a great example. Small story, and then I want to definitely hear what happened so we can talk about your stuff. But so in this whole situation, I was trying to get a restraining order from my youngest son's father. And when I filed the restraining order paperwork, I put in that there's like he hurt me, he hit me. There's medical evidence of it. And so he kept saying, not guilty, I'm not guilty, I'm not guilty. And in those quiet moments, I heard tell the DA, like, go look in your medical records. So I went and I looked in my medical records because Kaiser gives you the ability to go look at everything online. And I looked in my medical records and I realized, oh, there are some notes that the doctors made about domestic violence, about the abuse in my medical record. So I went and wrote a little victim witness statement, which is private. It only goes to the attorneys and the judge. And I directed the DA where to look, what day to look into my medical records to get that evidence. As soon as I sent that, a few weeks later, he pled guilty. That started to turn the whole thing around. But I would never have heard that if I had been so focused on, I've got to get answers, I've got to rush around, I have to work harder. Right? In that frenzy when everything feels like it's falling on you and it's everything, and you're drowning and you're getting tossed in the wave. If you can't get quiet and get present and get calm in the middle of a tornado or in the middle of getting tossed in those waves, you're going to die. You're going to drown. But if you can get calm and find which way is up, you can find your air again.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? That's what I
Yes.
mean by being present. So
And
tell me yours.
yeah. Well, by the way, your daughter is a swimmer. I've done an Ironman. I was a high school swimmer in addition to playing basketball. Actually, I was in Costa Rica, and that happened to me where I got like you get it metaphorically. Literally, I got smacked with a wave when I was swimming in the Pacific
Mhm.
that was so big that I remember I got spun around so much. I remember opening my eyes and actually like even though my eyes were burning like crazy from the salt, actually stopping for a second and seeing the bubbles because I gotten smacked in the head so hard. And
Ooh.
yeah, that was like one of those almost slow motion moments in life where I think if I was a less experienced swimmer, I could have really been in trouble, but I had
Oh,
the foresight
absolutely.
to, open my eyes and be like, "Oh, well, there it goes."
It goes that way. Well, and growing up on the East Coast, or sorry, on the West Coast of California, I'm a beach girl. I grew up on the beach, so I've been tossed in those waves more than most people will ever get a chance to get tossed, and panicked and thought, oh my God, what am I going I'm running out of air. But eventually, if you calm down, you will float to
Yeah.
the surface and you'll find your air again. You just have to
Well,
stop panicking in those moments.
and both literally and metaphorically, thrashing around uses up your oxygen, and
It does.
literally and metaphorically can kill you.
Yes. Yes. So what I learned to do is stop thrashing around when life was sending me huge sets of waves.
Yeah,
And that got me out. That was
yeah.
my life raft.
I don't know that, everybody is some of the younger viewers probably haven't seen the movie for, Rain Man from the '80s, which is about a,
Oh, that's a good movie.
autistic guy
Yeah.
that, turns out he can count cards, and his brother figures it out and tries to exploit it, essentially.
Hmm.
And in the movie, the autistic gentleman is kind of always trying he's seen, an old comedy movie about, like, Who's on First, which is like an old, I don't know,
Yeah.
40s
It's an
comedy
L
bit or something.
it's a Costello, I
Abbott and
think.
Costello, yeah.
Abbott and Costello. Yeah.
And so he's always trying to, like, run this problem in his head, and he's talking to himself, trying to find an answer because he can normally
Mhm.
find a mathematical answer to stuff. And you just see him, like, working this, working this, working this. He doesn't get that it's a joke. And I think a lot of people that get into panic mode do the same thing. It's like
Mhm.
you know, you can talk yourself in circles. It's not going to like, you're just looking at the wrong thing.
I call it when you're inside the bottle, you can't see the label. You need
Yeah,
somebody from the outside to go, "Here you go," and pull you out. That's
yeah,
why great coaches exist,
yeah,
because you cannot solve the problem while you're inside the bottle thinking the same way that got you inside the bottle. That's the definition of insanity that
yeah,
Einstein talks about, or at least he's been credited with it.
yeah. So I realized that looking back, what I probably would have changed to my mid to late 20s, instead of just doing gig work, which would be I would voice track, which is essentially pre-record for other radio stations around the country. I would write. That's all trading time for money. And I did an MBA because I was able to get it for free, and I definitely learned some good stuff there. And but I really was thinking about that. I'm like, maybe I should just start a snowplow business or something. 'Cause you're in Chicago, and I didn't pull the trigger on it, and I probably would have been as good off doing that as about anything. And there was just something that didn't let me leap. And I think part of it was
Mhm.
my job was so dang hectic, is like I could be at events anytime, day or night, in addition to being live on the air, 25 hours a week, pretty close to it. I had all kinds of events essentially to keep my name out there, to keep the ratings up, to continue to, kind of have a job in that world. And
Mhm.
so I also realized that employers, if you let them, essentially will, even good employers will work you around the clock.
Yep.
And it has the effect of keeping you in that job when maybe
Yep.
you could go to do something else because you can't read the label on the bottle.
Yep.
And so I wished I would have started something there. There were so many steps I just didn't understand, even though I had a pretty good idea of marketing. It just felt so overwhelming. I just didn't do it. So I kept trading time for money, which paid some bills in the short term, but it didn't ever scale to anything or stop. Um,
Right.
like continue to pay. Just stop. Like when you stop working, it stops producing money.
And keep in mind, back then, this kind of gig economy didn't exist.
Yeah.
You couldn't just start a business or go out on your own the way we can now. 20 years ago, that wasn't really a thing. So you needed a track to run on, you needed marketing, you needed too many more things.
Yeah.
Now here we are. And now it's not about trading your time for money. It's about leveraging your expertise and all the things that got you here so
Yeah.
that you can now improve somebody else's life, right? I had a client tell me last week, we had an epiphany. It was like, boom, there it is. That's the thing. You got it. We nailed it within 20 minutes. And
Yeah.
she was like, well, I realize that our calls are getting shorter. I'm like, but we're not doing this based off of a time thing. This is
Yeah.
based off of my expertise and the value that I'm providing and the solutions that it doesn't matter if it takes me 10 minutes to get the solution or an hour, right? It's still, you got the solution.
Yeah.
We're not worried about how long it takes me, right? It's going to take me less and less time as time goes on
Because you're
because I'm
getting
just going
better.
to keep getting better and better at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, when I look at, like, kind of when should I jumped out on my own again, one of the things I did realize is that first of all, that your early 40s is actually the time to start a business when you're the most likely to be successful statistically.
I agree
Um,
because you're at your peak.
yeah.
You're at your peak in terms of experience. You've got a couple of decades of experience and you still have the energy that you had in your 20s. Hopefully, if you're taking care of your body, you do. Right. So you've got a good 20-year run starting from 40 to 60 that you can sustain those energy levels. And all you're doing is racking up more and more expertise. So those are your peak earning years. That's
Yeah.
why when people retire at 65, it's like, We don't need to retire at 65 anymore. 75, yeah. 80, don't be working at 80. Come on. Stop it. Right? But there's people that are still in the peak of their experience getting and their experience delivering at 65 that they don't need to stop.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's a number? Things have
Well,
changed.
the thing that changed for me, honestly, the two things. Number one, I worked for an absolutely incredible marketing agency. And first of all, I had a wonderful CEO that I still, keep up with to this day. And
Oh.
then the second thing was I was able to walk into, companies between the Fortune 50 and Fortune 200 size and realize that like I can
Mhm.
step into the ring with anybody because until that point
Mm.
I'd done mom and pop stuff. I'd never done really big businesses outside of being like a marketing director for a media company. And
Mhm.
when I realized that I could get in there and hang with the people that were managing brands that you find in Walmart and Target, it changed. And I realized
I bet.
I realized how to bill and how to get rid of bad clients. Right. And then on the commercial real
Shuts up
estate
the
private equity
imposter
thing,
syndrome too,
yes, it does.
because you
Um,
go, "Oh, I am as good as that. I just haven't had a chance to show everybody yet."
yeah. And
Yeah, that's where I'm at right now
I worked
too.
with some really good people in kind of commercial real estate private equity. People are still really good friends, very supportive. And again, it's like I found out that I could hang,
Mhm.
because, then you're in the arena of some of these national commercial real estate firms. I mean, are in the billions and billions of dollars. And essentially we're, going head to head and I'm helping the sales team win deals that, we're up against $1 billion company. And that was when I really realized like, oh, I can do this. Like,
Mm.
I can do this on my own and be okay. And I had to, um, there are things I do now that I never would have had the backbone to try back when I had, in my early 30s. I realized that I just didn't have the experience yet to really launch. And, it
Mhm.
wasn't any kind of course or any kind of advanced degree that
Well,
taught me
that's time.
how to start out. It was just like I had to just slug it out for enough years to just know.
Yeah.
And so that was actually one of the things I wanted to talk about is, when you're working, you work with a lot of executives that are in corporate America. It seems like everybody would love to leave their job and start a business, or at least a lot of people would.
Mhm.
And people ask that question of like when. There's certainly a time that's too soon because I've seen a lot of
Yeah.
22, 24, 25-year-olds that get out and they're like, I'm a business coach, I'm a crypto expert, I'm a whatever. And I'm like, you're a liar. That's your only qualification is you lie boldly. You're not a
Right.
software expert, you're
Your brain just stopped developing, right? It's just
yes.
now hit its full development. You are not an expert at anything yet. And I wouldn't have called myself one at 25, even with a master's degree and all that experience training behind me. I still didn't call myself an expert.
Well, there's a pretty big Twitter account. I can't remember what the handle is, but it was somebody that was doing crypto, crypto, crypto until crypto cooled down, and then
Mhm.
the account literally just changed, like, their screen name and, changed their images and just started, like, tweeting real estate stuff, and it's like, "Well, hire me, I'm a real estate strategist," and, like,
Oh,
eventually it came out, whoever the account owner was 23, 24 years old, and they were just essentially copy pasting from Google, but
yeah.
a few people were dumb enough to pay them until they got busted that, like, none of this is real. So, there's too
Oh,
early to start a business.
oh,
I
sure.
I suppose there's a too late, but you can always find examples like Colonel Sanders in his 60s when he
I don't
founded
think it's
Kentucky Fried
ever
Chicken.
too late. I don't think it's ever too late. You've
Okay.
got because you can make so much money in business so quickly that if you were 60 and your goal is to retire at 65, you can do it. Start a
You can
business,
still make it.
go do it.
Yeah,
You're never going to make it as an employee. That's never going to
yeah.
happen. But you can go start a business and you can go, yeah, you can turn that 5 years into $1 million and be like, cool, I saved 75% of it. Now I'm going to go live in a nice, quiet life. You can do that.
So, when is the point when somebody should be able to check the box and say that they are ready then? If we know that there's too soon, for me, I just felt it. I realized that the pieces had come together and I had all the individual skills to where it would be
Yeah.
different than the previous times I tried. But do you have like a checklist when you're working with somebody that's like, oh my gosh, I'm in a decent level of leadership. Um, my boss is an idiot. Maybe it's time for me to just bounce.
I look at their level of discipline and their mindset more than like, do you have all of these little things in order? Because you can get the business entity stuff, all of that stuff is easy to put in
Yeah.
order. But it's like, in order for you to succeed on your own in business, you have to have an unbreakable discipline. You have to keep your schedule like it's like your like n- act like you have a boss that's breathing over your neck all the time, that's ready to completely fire you and you'll have no paycheck coming in. If you have that level of discipline, then you're probably going to do just fine on your own. But if you are late to work, if you're still like crying about having to get into work by 9 a.m. and you're not out there, you're not in the office at 7, just
Yeah.
trying to crush it because you freaking want to crush it anyway, then you might not have what it takes, or you need to cultivate it fast.
Yeah.
And most people in business should be type A personalities. Hiring really good type B, right? But type B people probably are not going to make the best business people.
Well, and one of the things I found very surprising, the 2 best business schools in the United States are both in Chicago. So Kellogg and Booth at, Northwestern and U Chicago,
Yeah, you can go hire
and
those guys.
yeah, you can what I was going to say is you can go hire those guys because what I found was when I was meeting a lot of these people when I was, I did some work in the tech startup scene back when there's a lot of cash flowing into there, kind of the mid 2010s.
Mhm.
I was at first intimidated, being like, okay, well, you went to Yale for undergrad and then you came out to Booth for your MBA, and I played basketball down there at the junior college. And what I found out was
Mhm.
that they have a skill set to move up pretty quickly in a very large organization of like 20, 50,000 employees
Yeah.
because they know how to make reports and they know how to say the right things.
Mhm.
But I also kind of started to realize like some of them, because of their, personality bent, education, whatever, are not able to start with an idea and see it
Mhm.
through an execution. It's like, well, I
Very
need a big
few are.
budget. I need a report. I need a report. I need a big team. And I
That's why a lot of
realized,
founders go and get VC money too, because they don't know how
yeah,
to bootstrap. They can't sell is
yes,
the biggest problem for a lot of them.
yeah,
Because if you can't sell, you should not be starting a business on your own.
yeah. Well, and I had a conversation with a friend of mine about that, where he was talking about how do I do social, how do I do this, and it's like, well, you can't sell, and you're very quiet and introverted, so you're not going to be the face. So you probably need to do this with somebody else.
Yeah, need a
You know,
co-founder.
quite frank.
Yeah. Yeah, and those are great people that can go out on their own, but they're just not going to be the front man, and they're going to leverage their skill set with somebody else's, right? That's kinda
Yeah,
where I was at with Chris. I'm a really good front person, but I knew enough technical stuff to know I'm not writing the code. I'm
yeah,
not gonna build the software myself. I'm gonna blow my brains out if that were the case. So I need a technical co-founder. He comes along and he's like, "There, boom, here you go." And I'm like, "Holy cow, look what you did."
yeah.
Like, yeah, but he won't get on camera. He barely is on social media. I'm like, "Dude, you gotta start talking to people." He's like, "I know that too." I'm like, "Come on,
I don't need
you
to talk to people. I need to make stuff.
hurry." And he's like, "You know, shy, a little more shy, right?" So
Yeah,
the shy people should not be trying to do something that requires a lot of attention. You
yeah,
want to strike out on your own? Get somebody who can do that, and you go do the technical stuff and do all the really important hard work that front person can't do because they're out there talking to people.
yeah. Uh, yeah, I'm just thinking about a mental checklist that people can utilize to kind of figure out like, is this time for me to jump? Because I can think back to my God,
Okay. Mental
nonprofit I was working
checklist.
for. Yeah, nonprofit I'm working for. I get there. I didn't interview with the CEO because that was kind of more of a mid-level management type situation. And the CEO is a guy like in his 60s that wears like before they were back in style with Gen Zers, he wore Crocs with like suit pants, and it's the weirdest guy. And what I
I don't
figured
even
out is he'd had
I don't
so much overconfidence because people had not just told him straight up, like, dude, you're not good at this. He was
interesting.
wildly overconfident, wildly top down driven. I saw one of the vice presidents have a heart attack that I think was mainly work related while I was there. And so I think it's possible to be so overinflated that you're like, well, I'm just going to make $1 million my first year out and not realize that just
You
people haven't told you what's up.
need to have a delusional, level of confidence
Yeah.
to do that, but you need a plan. So I don't know that I have a mental checklist for anybody who's like, well, when am I ready? You're ready when you have a plan that you can actually execute. And if you can't create the plan, then you've got some work to do to get that plan ready. And
Yeah.
judging by the look on your face, you're going like, well, so what's the plan? You're capable of making a plan on the fly and moving with it, but you have a rough idea of what you
Yeah.
want to accomplish and where you want to go. So many people don't even have that, and they don't have the confidence that they can even go get it. So, I mean, in order for you to be in business, you've got to sell something. Everybody in business is selling something to somebody,
Yeah.
right? Whether you're selling SaaS software to other companies or whatever, you're selling something. And if you can't get in front of people with a ton of confidence and go sell it, I would say stay keeping your job until you've gone and sold it a bit. Once you've sold it and you know what you're doing in terms of that, then you've got a lot more going for you and a lot more confidence to be able to step out on your own. Plus, having some savings and things like that is that you can afford to spend on getting your business off the ground is a really good idea.
Yeah. It's a bummer to see people that are like, "Oh, I've got this idea, but, I have so much credit card debt. I have a $1,200 a month car payment," or something insane like that.
Yeah. Well, ideas are a dime a dozen. And
Yeah.
not every idea, once you flush it out in terms of a P&L, is a good idea to follow, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't know how to do financial modeling or P&L or, those are important things to be able to do. And you don't even know if your product is a good idea to sell if you haven't done a financial model on it. If you don't
Yeah.
know how you're going to make money and how you're going to make profit and how you're going to be able to expand and grow with employees, like you're not ready to quit that job. You need to
Well,
have all of that stuff in place first,
I remember
I
in our
think.
20s, one of my good friends who actually owns a restaurant here in St. Louis now, he was in Nashville at the time, I was in Chicago, and he was thinking about starting some sort of he's a chef, thinking about starting some sort of food-based thing, and this was definitely the kinda, like, peak recession, 2010, 2011, somewhere in there, and I think one of the ideas he had was to, start a cupcake shop, and I had read enough stuff to be like, "Dude, those don't make it as soon as the economy gets good," because the margins are so slim, you can only afford the commercial rent when the economy is terrible. And it's normally a sign of a decently deep recession that somebody's trying to open a cupcake shop because it's just the margins are so thin. I'm like, why don't you just go stay at your job as a assistant executive chef and do like corporate gifts or corporate like orders in the morning, like deliver
Yeah.
brownies, cookies, whatever for the sales team. You're going to be way better off doing that. And one of the things people do is they just start businesses that are going to be low margin or lifestyle businesses to where they're not going to scale very easy. And you
All they did was
can
buy
do
themselves
those.
a job, and
Yeah.
maybe that's enough, and that's cool.
Yeah. You
Do
you
that.
got to decide like if you want a lifestyle business. There's another one that kind of the typical example uses like coffee shops. And I've seen 3 or 4 coffee shop owners try to get to their fifth location, which is it seems like the level that people can't get past.
Mhm.
And close down like their fourth and fifth locations. Like, oh, I'm just gonna do 3 because I gotta drive around every one of these things and count down the cash drawer myself every
See,
because they didn't figure out how to systematize
they
that.
didn't put a good plan
Um,
in place ahead of time
yeah,
so that they know, I'm not gonna open up this location until the revenue over here is X, and
yeah.
I've got Y to be able to do this, and I've got
You
enough.
train somebody.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, you gotta plan for it. If you're not planning, then you're gonna fail.
yeah,
And by the way, there's nothing wrong with failure. And in my opinion, there's no such thing as failure until there's no more opportunities to try it again. As long as you can try again, you haven't failed, right? You've just learned all the different things that don't work out very well. But, once you run into a situation where you have no more opportunities to try again, okay, that's failure. Then you got to move on and do
yeah.
something else. But rarely in
Well,
business
and that
can you completely fail.
you told me that this summer when I was just bummed. I was like, I don't know, I just got a job. I was like 3 months in, and you were like, "Well, do you have a lot of leads?" I'm like, "Well, yeah." And I'm like, and you're like, "Well, are you closing?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm having some invoicing troubles over here. People aren't paying me on time and stuff." And you're like, "Well, that's not a reason to quit. Like,
Right.
you're actually selling stuff. Just, get a lawyer, make them pay you."
Yeah. Get a lawyer, make them pay you, have a better contract, go sell more stuff. Go do more
Yeah,
stuff for more people. Yeah.
yeah,
What you were frustrated about was something that is easily fixable, right? Get a lawyer and don't do that again, right? Don't let them don't work for not getting money again. Get the
Yeah.
money up front. Don't wait 30 days. Don't give them a net 30 right off the bat, right? Give your clients net 30s after they've proven that you can trust them to pay you on time. And then you can start working in kind of deals like that. But what you were dealing with was an admin problem, not
Yeah.
a sales or business or fulfillment or execution type of problem.
Well,
Those are easy to fix.
and I had to come to the point where I realized that, having experiencing somebody who whines about something doesn't mean that they're not gonna work with you, because
Right.
then I got a lawyer and I started doing the contracts right, and I
Mhm.
had somebody push back and be like, "Well, you're gonna charge 12% interest?" And I was like, "Annually, yes.
It's
I'm charging a
1% per month.
1% interest rate for being a month late."
Mhm.
Like,
Don't be
kid,
late.
that's just don't be late. I mean, like, eh and
Yeah,
then
it's
it wasn't a
reasonable.
problem. It wasn't a problem, it wasn't a reason not for the deal not to go through,
Right.
but I think when I was younger or less experienced, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, well, I can't charge you 1%. That's probably I understand you're probably not gonna work with me." And then
Yeah.
you do enough stuff and you're just like, "Okay, cool, then, uh,
That and
that's back
that
to
is
bad
what
clients will sink you."
that's what life teaches you, right? You get
Yeah,
15 years down the road, you get to 40 and you're like and you realize so many of the things that people complain about aren't the real objection. They're just throwing
yeah,
stuff out there. The real objection is something very, very minor, and it's easy to
yeah,
flesh out, right? Like, you're just worried that I'm not gonna be able to deliver. Well, here's what we're gonna let me go back to why you brought me into this conversation to begin with. That's what you do,
yeah.
right? That's how you closed them.
So it seems like we're at the point we're gonna wrap this episode up. I think
Mhm,
that the big takeaway that I got from this is what you said about rock solid discipline.
mhm.
If you're gonna skate in as a manager or whatever, and you're always worried about being on time, you can't focus yourself, you can't fire people. Um, stay at the job until you can do that
If
stuff.
you're more concerned about what other people think of you than reaching your dreams and goals, you have some mindset work to do if you ever want to get out on your own. So there's a lot of people that are very frustrated with their current working conditions, their current career path, but they are too concerned about what everybody else around them is going to think rather than making themselves happy. Their wife, their kids, their in-laws, their boss, their coworkers, their best friends, la 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 la. Bottom line is, as long as their opinion matters more to you than your happiness, you're gonna stay stuck. Gotta
Yeah.
get out of
And you
that.
know what? The flip side is there's nothing wrong with looking at yourself and just being like, "Oh, I don't wanna
Right.
I don't wanna do it." You don't have to. I would say
Yeah.
you're way better off staying and moving up in a company and reaching higher levels of management, higher levels of pay, higher levels of commission, uh, and just realizing that the stuff that business ownership's gonna require, you just don't wanna do.
And that's okay.
You're
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. You're gonna do way better, by being the authentic version of yourself and
Mhm.
then lying to yourself and being like, "Well, I can do these things," and
Yeah.
deep down, you know that that's really gonna be a struggle.
Mhm.
It's kinda going back to the whole, like, know thyself thing. Just that's
Exactly.
that's okay.
Exactly.
You're way better off as a high performing person in meeting you where your personality, skill set, whatever is,
Yeah.
than trying to be something
You're
that you're just not
not.
gonna be able to get into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say everybody can develop the discipline. So I wouldn't want someone to look at themselves and say, well, I don't have it. I've never had it. I'm not ever going to have it. Well, did you ever have the opportunity to build it? Do you know how to build it? No, nobody ever showed me. Well, why don't you try that before you give up on your dreams? Because the people that regret their life the most are the ones that never tried something. So before you give up and say, nope, this is my path, I'm going to stay in corporate America, I'm just going to be great there, even though I really want to do something on my own because it's itching at me and it's been itching at me, then it's like, then go develop the skills and just know it's going to be hard work for a while. It's going to suck. And it's really not that the work itself and developing skills is all that difficult. It's this feeling of going through a cheese grater as you're growing that that feels like it's the hard work. It's really not. It's just your perception of how it feels. That's all.
Yeah.
And that's the big barrier that people that are really successful leap over, and people who are not do not leap over that.
Yeah. I think the most extreme example, that I've seen of a friend of mine who was successful was that he actually got into business in his early 20s with a guy that took all they he did very well, like, right off the bat, and his business partner took, something like $4 million, um, cleared the bank accounts, moved to Mexico, and bought a resort with it.
Oh,
And apparently the guy's still down there.
oh, wow.
Um,
I
has
mean,
never come back to the United States, never faced charges, just permanently left and has lived, like, as a pretty rich guy in Mexico, essentially by, stealing the other half of the
wow.
cash out of the business. And I think 90% of people would have just called it. And my friend has gone on to, start everything from like, you know, an executive protection security business to owning a couple jewelry stores in Chicago and LA. And it's only because like he didn't quit. I believe he actually slept in a warehouse, which was like the only thing they had left. So he like slept in the warehouse and showered at the gym to be able to keep going
Good for
when anybody
him.
else would have just called it and gotten a job. And when I think about that, it's like anything that I've actually kind of had to overcome in the first 9 months, like, is not nearly like that.
Right. Right. So that's a good sign. Keep going.
Yeah.
And if
So
you get to
you
that
can.
point, right, if something like that happens, you will have built up so much of yourself getting to that stage that you know you can redo it again. You're like, it's
Yeah.
only a matter of time. I've already got the skill set. That's the beautiful part about actually going through and building those skill sets to start your own business rather than staying in corporate America because they can't take the skills away from you. The skills that it takes to go from $0 to $1 million a year, you can duplicate that again. Right? Don't
Yeah.
choose the lousy business partner, right? It's just the same conversation I had with you. Well, don't have a better contract. Make better
Yeah.
decisions now that you made that mistake, but that doesn't mean that you're not good at what you do. You're great at
Yeah.
what you do, and that guy was too.
Yeah. And hey, since you hung around this long, we're gonna sell some stuff for 30 seconds, then we're gonna wrap up. She is Allie Covington. You can hit her up. Your contact info is in the description of this piece of content, wherever you're getting it, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. And you do executive and personal coaching and training. And like you definitely changed my life, fixed my shoulder, and talked me out of quitting prematurely on a business to make me a lot of money, which I greatly appreciate.
You're very
When
welcome.
do most people, when they come to you and say, I need help on this, they're at that stage where it's like they just don't know what to do next, right?
Yeah, I'm at my wit's end. I'm pulling my hair out. I don't know what to do. Come tell me what to do. Okay, cool. Here we go. It's fun.
And my name is Seth Hurd. I run a company called Manx Solutions. If you are looking to streamline your entire marketing around podcasting, it's pretty incredible what you can do with AI if you know what the heck you're doing. Most people
Mhm.
don't, which means their company starts a podcast or they start a podcast as a business owner or solopreneur and they talk to nobody for 20 episodes and then give up. We had more than 5,000 impressions on our first episode of a completely unknown brand because I understand the algorithm and know what the heck I'm
You
doing.
know what the
And
heck
I
you're
can
doing. I
also,
was impressed.
yes,
I was like, "Look at what get him to 1 week. Holy cow.
yeah.
Oh, thank you for doing that for me. I love
So,
it."
you can stumble around in the content world and not have a plan together.
Yeah.
Or I can take you as an executive or entrepreneur and turn you into a brand that's going to get you, your company, more eyeballs and more customers because you just got to know what the heck you're doing.
Mhm.
And you can find me in there. We'll talk about that more as our own show continues to grow. But don't just go stumble around and think that it's the easiest thing in the world to build a podcast because you've watched 3 YouTube videos. Ain't that hard. It's not that easy. I promise you.
I know that for a fact
From
because Chris and I tried, and we probably had, like, 25 views for for podcast. And after 25 episodes, I went, "I'm done. I don't have time for this anymore." So I'm happy
so
to be
yeah,
here.
hire me. We can get you enough content to 10x your investment pretty easily. Um, thanks again. We are live on Tuesdays at it would be 1 p.m. Eastern.
Noon
And
oh,
then
yeah, and
it's
noon
also a
Central.
time on the West Coast there. Yeah,
A
10 a.m.
time.
your time.
10 a.m.
Yeah.
It's
You got any
time.
questions? Hit us up on social media. We are happy to field those in future episodes and talk to you. And other than that, we will catch you next week.